Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
When you think about it, stories have been with us since we were born. Parents would tell us a story. We love hearing a story. You watch TV, a movie. What is it? It's a story. She is a storyteller of sorts, known as a heyoka, a healer. She's an intuitive, medium, card reader, helps you navigate life in many different ways. But a lot of times it does start with a story. And we brought her back in here. Janis Reed is with us. Hello there.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. You do honestly, and I'm not just saying this, you tell the best stories with such interesting, delightful detail. That's the best way I can describe it. There's always, just the way you weave through it. And I never know what you're going to say, nor does anybody else. So,
Half the time I don't either.
that makes it fun and insightful and interesting. So where are we going today? What's our story about?
I've got a story today. This is a story about myself that I didn't realize was unpacking until, I was in my 30s, and this started when I was about 7. See, I've come to learn with all of the different memories and stories that flow through me when I get into stuff, they're like memories. And I read this line that somebody else wrote that I wish I had, that said, true knowledge is found in remembering our total journey. That makes sense, because if you don't remember that thing hurt the last time, you're liable to do it again and get hurt all over again. Hence, remembering our total journey. I went through a series, about 10 years worth of series, a couple of 3 times a year, and I would participate as a volunteer in a past life regression seminar. It was mind-opening. So I came to understand the value of remembering our total journey. Doesn't just start when we were, in first grade. Sometimes it can go further back. Genetic memories. There have been people that have little places where a bullet struck them in the Civil War, but now they have a little mole there and stuff. Little residuals. A lot of kids in India we hear about that know things and go right to the house they used to live in.
I just want to interject, if I may. I've heard that before, and I know somebody who does past life regressions. Somebody goes back, and this one person told me, and she's legit, that she did it for a guy, and he didn't say anything to her. And she said when he was under hypnosis, he was talking about wartime or something similar to that, and he got shot in the back. And wouldn't you know it, in his back there is a dimple, and he's had back problems since he was born.
Oh yeah, it's a real deal. We are made of yesterday. All of our yesterdays. They didn't just start when we got born here, but the yesterdays before that. When I was a little kid, I had this experience that was foretelling of the life I would grow up and become, but I didn't know it then. See, when I was a little kid, I had stories I'd tell my parents from back before I was born. And it just carried on. It's always been there. So I've always been the one that they picked out. But when I was about 6 years old, I wanted to tell you a personal story to see how sometimes dreams can unpack our history without us realizing what's going on. When I was born in the marshes of Glen, outside of Brunswick, Georgia, right on the coast in the marshes. And my grandparents lived there as well. My siblings were born in other states and other places, but I got the luck of the draw, and I was born right there where my grandparents lived. So I took that as like my second home. My granddaddy was superior to all else. But when I was about 6, there was an announcement that they were going to build a house out on the island. Now, in my family, the island means St. Simon's Island. In the early 60s, there were not a lot of people living out there. It was strictly a residential island. People didn't go there to party and play golf like they did on Sea Island. St. Simon's, they came and had houses and raised their babies and had a life there. My granddaddy had always wanted to live on St. Simon's Island. So by the time I was 7, their new house was complete and we got to go see it. My parents and took my siblings and I. When they first showed me the lot, I fell in love with it. It was close enough to Mallory Square that I could hear the boys clanging out in the channel between St. Simon's and Jekyll at night. It was just a heavenly spot to hear that cong, cong, cong as the boats would go by, big ships. And I could hear that. So I approved of the lot. But by the time they got the house built, people had come in and removed all of the trees from where they were going to build a house. And what showed up when they removed my grandparents' trees for that property to clear was the property right behind them that I had not seen before. St. Simon's at the time was a veritable jungle of live oak trees and fallen pine trees and Spanish moss hanging down to the ground and wild plants and sounds. And when the lot behind them was exposed, I just stood there and cried. My mom wanted to know what was going on. There was a tree in the next lot over on the other side of the chain link fence my grandparents had put up. And the tree was an old pine tree that leaned really far over. It was ancient and it was tangled up with other ancient live oak trees. Live oaks grow like hands and arms that just beckon little children to climb up into them. They've got their arms in their laps right there open. So the trees were so old, they had kind of grown and mingled together so that the live oak tree was holding up what was left of the original pine tree. So close to the channel, big storms had blown through over the hundreds and hundreds of years that the island had been there. And these trees at some point had blown over in a storm. Well, when I looked up and saw that tree lying at about a 45-degree angle with Spanish moss dribbled from it and the straight up trunk of another tree that grew up from its center, looking like the mast of a boat, I saw the pirate ship. I saw the ship, and man, the memories just flooded back. People who know me these days, they pretty much will admit to you that, yeah, I'm a pirate. I've always felt like a pirate. But when I saw that tree fell over, I didn't see the tree. I saw the ship. The old, scarier than any nightmare ship you could imagine, right there in broad daylight. And the wind blew the Spanish moss, and that tree was just picking on me. That night I had nightmares. I woke up screaming so loud that the house next door called my grandparents' house to find out what was going on with the little girl, because they woke up with me screaming in the middle of the night. That was how my grandparents got to know their next door neighbors. The nightmares just were nuts. I nightmared and had dreams of following a woman inside that tree that leaned over when it was still standing straight up. The base of the tree was enormous. It was probably 4 or 5 feet around at the base. It was huge for a pine tree. And I had followed a woman into the tree. The interior of this big yellow pine was carved out, and it had staircases rolling around the inside of it, going all the way up to the top boughs, carved out of the tree itself. It was brightly lit. This woman lived inside that tree. So I followed her, and she noticed me following her. When she got to the top, and I realized that the top was the end of the road, I'd wake up screaming. It took years before my grandparents gave me a call somewhere in high school that someone had finally purchased that lot and taken down the tree. It was safe for me to come back. We went every weekend. I mean, this tree just haunted me and picked at me for years. And I'd have nightmares, sometimes for weeks afterwards when I'd get back home. That tree was calling my name. After I started realizing that some of my stories could help other people understand things, I went back and I started thinking about that tree. I mean, the tree was famous. My grandmother told everybody about me waking up the neighbors. that was a famous tree. So there's pictures of the tree, drawings of the tree, photographs of the trees, other stories about the tree. But that tree was my tree. I started having dreams again as I started wondering about it as I grew up. And the tree, the woman that went into the tree, was dressed in silks and lace, golden colored. She was from 1436. I know that because she knew that. She told me that. I became, at the time, her friend. I mean, she lived in a tree. She had to be crazy as a bat. But I was a little girl, so I befriended this woman because sometimes she'd forget to eat. But she was always going up to the top and looking out to sea. And she told me that he said he'd be back, that she was waiting on him. She knew he'd be back. He promised her. So I would make sure she ate, and I just kind of took her under as a charge. She was a crazy woman. And, in my people, we took care of crazy people. So I'd watch out for her and make sure she ate once in a while. When I became an adult and the dream started coming at me again, I did some research, and there was a story in the newspaper about human bones that had been found, what sounded like in that lot behind my grandmother's house. So that was real research. So I did some more investigating and more unopening. And the dream kept unfolding. As more I'd looked, the more the dream would unfold. The woman had been taken on a pirate ship. But as a woman and her delicate constitution, the man had dropped her off on this island. As a pirate, he knew there were people there, and they were pretty good people. They weren't vicious. They weren't man-eaters. So he left this woman there and said he'd be back. Promised he'd be back. Well, he was a pirate. He never returned. He just never did. But she believed him. And as she waited for him, she built this house. She hollowed out that tree all the way up. It must have gone up 40 feet before she looked out onto the ocean. What I noticed was that her belly kept growing even when she didn't eat. Eventually, she had the child. She died. But I was stuck with the child, and I was just a young child myself. So we took the child into the tribe and raised the baby, and then the people came, and the Spaniards started filling up the shores, and my tribe was decimated, and I don't even know what happened to me or the baby. At this point in my real life, I'm well into my 40s, and I'm just now unfolding. Why is the newspaper telling me there were human bones found there right there by the tree where the woman died? So I looked it up. And it seems that there were a people who lived on St. Simon's well before the Spaniards. They were a Tacoma tribe. They spoke a special language called Macama. They were almost immediately annihilated when the Spaniards started to fill up the shores. They were very peaceful people. In real life, where my grandmother built the house, between her house and the pier, there is a small acreage of live oak trees. No roads are allowed to be built in this lot of old trees. They are what remains of the original island and the Tacoma people. When I waited for the school bus walking through them, I never thought about why nobody built there. It was such a pretty park. I'd climb all the trees. But when I found out later, it was a part of the history of the island, was this tribe before the people came, before the white people came, the pale people came. To my surprise, in that back lot and in my grandmother's lot, right in that area, was their village. That's where they lived. The woman, if she did exist, would have been taken to exactly this spot on the island. Her baby would have been brought up exactly right there, near that tree, right next door to my grandmother's house, maybe even in that area. The community would have been big. The island is several miles big. It's not a tiny place. But in this one village existed before the light people came. And someone in my nightmare had received a white baby to raise on her own, because that was a part of taking care of that crazy woman living in the tree. And then all of that in my dreams, just dreams and nightmares, to find out that there was a village there, that what that dream was absolutely probable, possible. It wasn't just a harebrained dream of a kid. At 6, 7 years old, I wouldn't have known about those people living there. I wouldn't have known about the history of that island. I hadn't been to school. Nobody had taught me anything. But the dreams brought back memories of the people who lived there and my experience with them. So as I began to tell stories in search of help for other people, this story about the tree came back up again and grabbed me in my dreams one night. And I realized that because of my terror of that tree, I had never really looked at that dream, that whole thing of events, really closely, because it was terrifying. But as an adult, I felt like I'm the big girl now, and I unpacked it and discovered this wonderful thing. It could be an historical novel or something. When I work with other people and I hear the sounds of their voice, it's not really different from listening to the sounds of the ocean waves, the sounds of the wind blowing through the tall boughs of pine trees that brought me to that memory. When I hear you talk to me, all of your history comes out your mouth. It shows in how you hold your body when you're talking about something, if you're tense or relaxed. And I can read that like a little movie script and tell it back to you. And you might be able to find out the origin of something that is important to you, not unlike I did with that tree. It really wrecks me to know that my grandparents, they're not here anymore. Maybe they know about the tree by now, and I'm just now finding out. To tell all of my relatives, I figured it out. I know what the tree's about. But the resulting story with the names and the people and the history, these are things that have happened in the last, I don't know, 10, 15 years for me. That tree scared the jeebers out of me. It's never too late to find the knowledge, your true power that's hidden in knowledge of your total journey. This was a part of my total journey, which is kind of interesting. I mean, as I really go back, I realize I've had many presumed life experiences that stem from this little tiny place on the earth. It's a barrier. St. Simon's and Jekyll are barrier islands. They were too far from shore for people to go back and forth easily. So once you lived there, that's where you lived. Later in the world, plantation owners came, Coffin came, interesting name, bought up property and had plantations on the islands. And then when slavery was finally outlawed and put down, the plantation owners, at least on St. Simon's, many of them just went back to shore and they left everybody there. So that the island became more greatly populated with people of dark color than white people for a long time, 100 years or so. And then St. Simon's Island next to Sea Island started getting a lot of attention. Jekyll Island got a lot of attention. Presidents and people of industry would have houses out there, and attention was brought to those islands and how pristine. And gosh, the only people out there owned them was those black people. All they had to do was move them out of the way. And St. Simon's, the people who lived there were not just some dumb bunny. They knew the value of where they lived. And they refused to sell. See, my parents and my grandparents spent the whole length of time my grandparents were living and in the house trying to buy that back lot. But the people of color who owned the lots around my grandmother's house refused to sell. We laughed, we hoorah'd them. You know, they knew what they had. So it was always like a matter of pride that we were able to live in such a beautiful place because we were allowed that opportunity to live on what I thought of as their island. Long before I knew about black and white and yellow and brown and red, long before I knew about the other tribes that lived there. I mean, when you live on the island, you learn about Georgia history and all the different countries, the Spaniards and the French and English and all the people that tried to take over and own St. Simon's Island and failed. Ultimately, it's a piece of the United States. History appeals to me, especially as it has to do with pirates, because those were the people that brought that woman there. In another life space, another story, I've been a pirate once or twice. I love the sea. I'm an island girl. What can I say? As I thought about what to share today on this little bit of time we talked together, I wanted to share that. I'll wrap myself out.
So
Somewhere out there.
I want to learn or have you share with us a little bit more in the time we have.
Ask me questions.
Do I hear you right in that when you hear somebody speak, you can extract or find details about their past?
Yes. Yes. I have no doubt that a lot of it comes from micro expressions that may or may not even register with me. But that, and coupled with the sound of the voice, the sound of the air coming in and out of their lungs and out your mouth, it tells me things. It's like some other storyteller whispering in my ear.
Wow.
Sometimes it can happen almost immediately and it'll shock me. And sometimes people that I know very well, I have a different relationship with. So it sometimes takes me longer to hear their stories because I'm just riding on who they are right now, and I'm enjoying that. Perseverance. We have to look for what we want to know. We're going to find what we look for. We just have to know what to look for.
I'm a big believer in if you look for it, you're going to find it. So be prepared. It might not be. There are times where you might be looking for something and then realize, I thought I might find it, but I really didn't think I would. And whoa, how do I deal with that now?
Yeah, I thought the best thing in the world was my grandparents moving out there to the island. Hot dang, the sand was right there. At 8 years old, I was able to walk by myself on the other side of the island to my aunt's house, my dad's sisters, all by myself because it was just such a peaceful place. I wouldn't want you out there by yourself walking now. The traffic and the people have just taken over it. I really can't go back home because it's covered up. But
Wow.
it's the story. We got to pick it up where we left it off sometimes. And apparently that story was important to me and I needed to tell it. But when they found out that there were bones discovered near where that tree was, I almost came unglued because, oh my God, they found the woman. But that would have been, in real life, that tree would have been straight up 500 or 600 years before I saw it leaned over. And it was hollowed in the middle. There's a million reasons I might have made up the story, but I couldn't have known those details. So it came from the sound of the tree, the wind blowing through it. I thought it was the greatest thing in the world for them to live out there until I found out they were next door neighbors to a monster.
We're out of time. I still have lots of questions. Yeah, we're definitely out of time.
Again.
Yeah, and the monsters get on my back. when
We will have no monsters on our back today. Thank you.
Not today. Not today.
Not today.
What's
Thanks for letting me share.
Oh, interesting story. And even what we talked about in terms of past lives, in my research, talking to people, seems legit, based on the evidence and things like that. What's your email address? How do we find you?
Write to me at my brand new email address, goddessjanis2, the number 2, at outlook.com. Or hit me up on Facebook at Janis Reed. That one's really easy to remember. Get in touch with me. Make an appointment. Send me a message. If you can root out my phone number, give me a call. But that's like going to be a secret between me and you for now. I do past life regressions. I have to wonder if the lady you're talking about, her first name might be Carol. But maybe not.
I'm trying to remember. No. And I talked to her a while ago, so I got to remember her name. It was just by chance we had this conversation. But she gave that story of the guy with the Civil War. And she would not have known that he has back issues. She would not have known that he has something that looks like where a bullet went in.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of different remarks, but we're finished talking for today, and we need to have something so that I'll talk about something next time.
Well, I appreciate that and love your stories. There's nobody that tells stories like you do, and it could be just a story, but there's always a message in the story, and that's the most important part.
It's how I was raised. It's a swamp thing.
It's an island thing too.
Yeah. All right. Enjoy your day.
Thank you so much.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.